This is Brian with ScreenFiles.com in review. What I'm looking at today is 2021's The Seventh Day, directed by Lange. And before I even begin, we're probably going to disagree about a few things. Namely, you may like exorcism movies. Personally, I think as a horror subgenre, it's one of the weakest. Mainly because it relies on the same silly tropes, which is to say, people spinning on the ceiling, things being propelled about the room. When it first started to appear, and I would have to say gain popular acceptance with William Friedkin's The Exorcist, those were novel things at the time. And it was genuinely terrifying, I imagine, to see it at that time. Nowadays, every other movie does this whenever you're doing exorcisms. Also poltergeist activity, but that's another discussion entirely. So it relies on tropes which are so done and so uninteresting. And sure, there's that initial shock value to be wrung from them, but after a point, it becomes really, really old and really, really ineffective. And that's my view on exorcism movies pretty much. In fact, as I mentioned elsewhere, that's why I appreciated John Boorman's Exorcist II: The Heretic so much. That movie is bonkers, but it's bonkers in an interesting way. It tries to reinterpret, to re-envision the exorcism story. It doesn't do it that well, I'll be honest with you. I think Exorcist II: The Heretic is a bit of a mess in certain ways, but it's a fascinating mess. And it tries to be something novel. And so I appreciate it. So, long story short, not a fan of the exorcism subgenre. Though, we could agree that Guy Pearce, who is British, has one of the best American accents we've ever heard. We've got to at least be able to agree on that. Because what I've noticed in The Seventh Day is that he's able to maintain it consistently, which is to say, he'll be shouting, but there's no trace of a British accent. Watch movies where people who are not American do American accents. Notice they don't shout a lot, because when that's happening, you can lose the accent. And in fact, some movies you can find it in. Guy Pearce is able to maintain that accent. Now, speaking of the accent, it's very bland. Which is to say, it doesn't necessarily sound like it's from anywhere. It sounds American, but unspecifically American. But in any case, it's a great accent, and I think it's the best. So, let's talk about The Seventh Day now. About, I'm going to say 1/3 of the way in, I thought this movie was going to be a groundbreaker. I thought this movie was going to probably rank among some of the best exorcism movies made. It literally started off to me that strong. Plus it also stars Keith David, I should say. And Keith David is always welcome. I need to see him in more stuff. He's a great actor. Though the movie begins with Keith David and Guy Pearce's character as a young man attending an exorcism. It doesn't go too well. Keith David? I believe it is Keith David. David Keith is a white guy. Keith David is a black guy. In any case, Keith David's character is killed, and Guy Pearce's character takes over the exorcism work. And he's a bit of a loner, a bit of an outlaw exorcist, a bit of an outcast. So he eventually is given a younger person to work with. Now this is where the movie is good, because it's about exorcism, but we don't know where the ghosts are. In the sense that, are the ghosts in these people's minds? Are these ghosts of the psyche? Are these ghosts and manifestations of the spirit? And you can't tell initially. Well, there's an actual demonic presence, but you can't necessarily tell where these things are emanating from. So that was interesting. I enjoy that. And there's a scene where Guy Pearce's character is driving with the new priest. They're driving to the house of a person who is believed to be guilty of murders of his family. The person's also a child, and they're driving to the house. And Guy Pearce's character is talking about how difficult it is to be an exorcist and how what they taught you in school is mostly BS, yada, yada, yada. Guy Pearce really carries it off really well, but it's kind of just mundane type of conversation, really. And so the young priest goes alone into the house, and he starts to see visions. And in my mind, I'm going, hold it, how is he doing this? Must be his own mind, his own upbringing manifesting itself. He's dealing with his own fears and insecurities. Well, that's what I thought it was anyway. And I really liked that. I thought, this is clever. But that wasn't what was happening at all. What was actually happening was that he was seeing the family and the little boy as if he had a superpower to go back in time. And from that point on, the movie pretty much goes downhill with some silly effects, some of them quite good, by the way, particularly the fire effects. Though it gets sillier and sillier with a conspiracy. I won't tell you what it is. It's interesting. It's an interesting angle. I won't deny that. But it didn't feel like a natural angle to me. It just felt kind of ridiculous. So from that point on, the movie gets progressively sillier. And it becomes like something produced by James Wan, which is to say, lots of things spinning around, occasional violence amounting to nothing. This was such a disappointment to me because it actually started off really strong. If you haven't seen The Seventh Day, it's currently on Netflix, check it out. It's not that good, frankly. And I think it's probably, I can't say it's one of the worst exorcism-based movies because, as I said earlier, I'm not a fan of the genre. I don't seek it out. Exactly for this reason. It tends to get silly and it gets very FX heavy, practical and CGI. And I don't enjoy that because there's no nuance to that. There's no depth to that. It's just silly. And The Seventh Day, when all is said and done, is a really silly movie, despite having good actors working on it. So what do you think? This is Brian with ScreenFiles.com in review. If you agree, disagree, let me know down below. And as usual, consider a like or a follow.